right, welcome back, folks. This is the Nick and Joe show. I'm Nick, he's Joe. He's in Ottawa, and I'm not. I'm up here in Sioux Lookout. And boy, I'll tell you, you know what? We've been really lucky up here so far this year. Uh, by this time last year, we had a lot of snow on the ground, and it's starting to snow. There's about an inch or two on the ground. We missed a major dump down in Thunder Bay, which is fine with me. Um,
Nick,
I'm
have you
sorry.
seen any picture? Have you seen any pictures of Ottawa this morning?
No.
We got a bit of a dump. We got about 3 or 4 inches of snow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, better you than me, buddy. I even have one of our neighbors has offered their services to plow my driveway, which isn't a big deal, but it's great because I don't want to do it. So we'll come to some kind of financial arrangement, and that'll be one more thing off my plate I don't have to worry about. Speaking of things on the plate we have to worry about, let's see. I'm just looking at our list here. Because Joseph and I, we do actually talk about what we're going to talk about before we talk
The
about
world,
it.
the world's population has hit 8 billion, but
8
that's
billion.
okay. That's
Yeah.
okay because at least in Western countries, Nick, the fertility rate is so low that we're not replacing ourselves. We're at below replacement levels. And so
Well,
the question from a public policy point of view is, how do we ensure that our population stays stable or continues to grow? And the only answer seems to be through immigration.
well, you can always try to encourage people to have more children of their own generically, or like homegrown kids. That sounds weird, because our birth rate, as when I checked on it, was today it was 1.40. Now, for years it was 1.47, which is still too low because if you want to maintain your population at a current level, you need at least 2.1. That's the birth rate, that's your maintenance level birth rate. If you're not at that, then you have to supplement, as you pointed out, with immigration. And I think what a sound policy is to encourage people to have children. And then one of the easiest ways to do that is to cut taxes. Stop making life so expensive. Never mind tax breaks, just cut taxes across the board for everybody, because then there's more money in the economy so people can afford to have more. Like, not everybody's like me or my wife and I. We made some very conscious choices about our lifestyle, and we had 8 kids, and we made some sacrifices during our lives about vacations and toys, and I'm talking about adult toys now, boats and things like that, that we simply didn't avail ourselves from because everything was going into looking after the kids. And that comes with its own rewards, but not everybody thinks that way. So you can incentivize people to have 2 or 3. You don't have to have 8. You know, if you had a lot of couples having 2 and 3 children, that would take care of a lot of the problem, because within 15, 20 years, that trend begins to turn itself around. But if we don't do that, then we have to import them. And then we have to ask some pretty tough questions. Number one, where do we want people to come from to populate Canada? Do we just throw the doors open and say, we don't care where you come from? We don't care about, if your belief system aligns with our traditional Judeo Christian ethic, that is our belief system. I'm not saying everybody has to be religious or anything like that. I'm just saying that, Canada was founded on the Judeo Christian ethic, or ethos, if you want. And if that's the case, what countries support that and what countries don't? And do we exclude some, or do we just say, doors open, come on in? I tend to think that what we should do is stop looking at it from corners of the earth and start looking at what these immigrants bring to the table. Immigration has to be good for the country more than it has to be good for the immigrant. In other words, if I have somebody who is in a high demand trade, take a we up here we're really looking for air maintenance engineers or AME. They call them AMEs. They're airplane mechanics, and we've got some people from South Africa, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, all coming to Canada to take jobs in the airline industry because they need, that they want the work. Oh, it's very hard to get Canadian born people to come up to places like this because either it's too cold or too far away or whatever it is. There's all kinds of excuses. For every person, there's a different excuse. So I'm wondering which is the better policy. I tend to lean towards the second one because frankly, what somebody believes and where they come from is irrelevant to me on a personal level. I don't care. As long as you're not doing harm to your neighbor, I don't care what you believe. I don't care who you sleep with. I don't care what you look like. So my tendency tends to go towards a secondary position. So I'm curious to hear what you think of that.
Well, it's a serious problem, and I don't discount the impact of high cost of living and the high cost of having children and raising children today. I don't dismiss the impact that has on the decision to have children, and I hear people talking this way, but I suspect that that's not really as big an issue as people tend to think it is. I think that what we're looking at, and it's not just Canada, it's in the West in general. Canada's not so bad. The United States is a little better than we are here. But countries like in many countries now in Europe and countries like Japan, with an aging population, especially with the baby boom bubble, okay,
Right.
that's aging now and that's going to start to that has already started to disappear. We're going to see in many countries real population decline. But it's largely because we're not having children, as you've already pointed out. And that's a decision that a lot of people are making, is that they just don't want to have children. And I'm sorry for what I'm going to say because it's going to annoy a lot of people out there, I think. But I suspect that there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here? That the decision is one of irresponsibility. It's that people don't see that they have a responsibility to procreate. And it is a responsibility. It's a blessing too,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's a responsibility as well. And I don't think that people feel as they used to this need, desire, and responsibility, obligation to bring children into the world. And frankly, okay, having said that, who could blame them? It's we the news cycle today is 24 hours and 7 days a week, and it's all bad news. And news organizations compete with one another to have even worse news. And on the subject of fertility, I was reading this morning about a new study that's come out that says that men around the world, okay, that the sperm count for men has dropped to 50% what it was somewhere around 25 years ago. And in the Western countries, okay, the affluent countries, countries like Canada and the United States, United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, France, Western Europe, that that the sperm count has dropped something like 68%. And
Now,
so it's just one more thing. Now, I don't know. I haven't delved into that study, Nick. So I don't know how credible I I think that the data is. So let's assume that it's very credible. Okay. It's a it's another disaster in the making. Another reason why the world is on the verge of falling apart. Okay. When we look at COVID, pandemic, and then remember a few years back it was SARS, and then there's the plastic pollution in the ocean, climate change. Okay, we haven't even talked really so much. We did last week with Tom Harris
Yeah.
about the COP27 conference going on in Egypt now, and again, uh, the uh, the head of the United Nations giving a speech at the opening of the conference talking about how this is our last chance to save the planet. It's do you blame young people? And by young people, I'm not talking teenagers, but in their 20s or even in their 30s for saying, what's the point of bringing children into the world? In 10 years, we're all going to be extinct anyway. If
Well,
it's
first
not,
of all,
if climate change doesn't get us, then COVID's going to get us, and if that doesn't get us, then nuclear war between the Russians and the Americans, and maybe the Chinese will get us. I mean, it's. I think it all contributes, but ultimately, it's. I think the real problem we're facing in the West in general, but also in other places in the world, is that there's a conscious choice not to have children. A, because they don't want to bring children into the world that's going to end up where they're going to suffer terribly in 10 years because the world is ostensibly going to burn up.
well, I
Or they
got,
just want or they're having too much fun and it cramps their lifestyle. There it
yeah,
is.
could
I've said
be.
it.
But I think that I got a real laugh out of John's comment. He said, I tried to do my part. I really did. I'll keep practicing. Okay, well,
Well, but
we won't pursue that conversation any further. This is a family
John
friendly show.
okay, but John, you're you could
You got to
try as
get in the
hard as you
game. You got to
want,
stop
okay, but when
practicing.
your sperm count is down 68%, I don't think it matters how much you practice. Okay, that's it.
I think he's got to, you know what I think it is? He's got to get back in the game. He's got to stop practicing.
I got to
You
stop
got to
hanging out with
start
you
doing.
guys. Yeah, I got to stop hanging out with you guys at this time of night. Is what I got to stop doing.
You have to stop. Okay, and the funny thing is, going back to this sperm count thing. All joking aside, okay, the question, of course, is, well, what could possibly be causing this thing? Okay, and what do you think it is? Okay, well, we
I think
don't
it's
know
that I'm
for
just
sure,
bad
but
at math and I can't count them all.
and
Funny.
and
I'm
that
bad at
would.
math and I can count all mine. How hard is it to get to 8?
But it's what? No, it's the environment, and I don't mean that in terms of climate change or anything like that. But it's you know microplastics in the environment and poor eating
You know what I
habits and
do wonder
obesity
about
and
though, Joseph?
on and on and on and on. The only thing that they didn't attribute, okay, is actually climate change. I
You
was
know,
waiting
I
for them to say climate change is behind this.
So I don't need to
well,
walk around with a windmill in my pocket.
no, that
Okay,
would be
good.
a bad idea.
All right, good to know.
Anyway, the but what it does make me wonder about this study, and I haven't seen it, so I can't answer this, but are they including, well, since we're talking sperm count, men who have had vasectomies? Is that factored in? Because that would have a
I don't
definite decline. Because
I
look,
I
that's too
I
personal
don't know,
an
Nick.
issue to get into on a family friendly radio show, or a situation like
No,
this.
but
But
why
there's
would
got
you
to be,
have a vasectomy so that you can continue to engage in sex but not have children, not have a risk of having children? And the whole reason is, okay, yes, you're right. You I think rightfully pointed out that at least in our part of the world, children are a financial burden, okay? And there's no question about it. Children are a financial burden, period. But the cost of raising children is high, and people don't want to pay that cost. But let's not pull punches here, okay? Because we're being honest, aren't we? This is the nature of our show. Let's be honest, okay? You don't
the
want to
nature
have
of things.
children.
There you go.
You don't want to have children because it cramps your lifestyle.
Yeah,
Okay?
if I could put this
I mean,
into one sentence, we've turned sex into recreation and taken the other element away.
right.
When that happens,
No,
although
you're
and
absolutely right. That's
yeah,
all it is.
that's if you look at the culture, if you look at talk about over sexualized, everything, no matter where you turn, has something. Somehow they tie it to sex, and it's titillating. There's a lot of things that go into that, but generally speaking, it cheapens the whole experience because you don't tie it to the fact that, okay, yeah, this is great, but the consequences are that that there's going to be offspring, and if you accept that and you go forward, fine. But too many people say, I don't want kids. I just want the fun. Well, guess what? They kind of go hand in hand. And there's consequences for when you separate, those two things and separate them and say, children are not part of my life. I don't want them. I just, excuse me.
You're again, I think you're absolutely right, Nick. And I think, let's call a spade, okay? There's a certain amount of we're spoiled in this part of the world in particular, because the birth rate problem is a Western problem. And it's a funny thing because people have always tied it to women having fewer children because when the more educated they are, there's a correlation between the two. But it's really, it comes down to, I don't want to have children because it cramps my lifestyle. I'm
Yeah.
too busy with my career. I'm
Yep.
too busy with my entertainment. Okay, uh, and uh, and freaks. We live in a free society, so that's it. People make the decision not to have children. There it
Well,
is.
Christy, you're right. That is, Christy posted a comment about raising that. That's probably about right. And it's one reason, you make a choice. If you're going to raise children, that's what's going to cost. And you have to sacrifice a lot of your lifestyle. There won't be 2 trips to Disneyland. There won't be, 2 boats in the driveway. There's not going to be a sports car in the garage.
And I that $10,000 to $15,000 a year or whatever, I can't remember. I just sort of caught the number. Okay, let's understand that already is okay. Yeah, $10,000 to $15,000 a year. That may be an accurate number. Okay, but that again is based on not economizing. Okay, look, we raised 4 children. Nick, you raised 8 children. It didn't cost you 8 children. Think about this. It didn't cost you $10,000 a year for 8. That's $80,000 a year. So you find ways to economize. Maybe you don't have the latest car. Maybe when they have the latest iPhone coming out now, I don't know what we're at now. What the iPhone 18 or something like that, or 15 or
Something
something.
like that.
Okay. Maybe instead of going out and spending money on all of this entertainment stuff, you have to cut back. And maybe you're not going to buy your children these things. You'll only have one car and it won't be the latest model. We had one time in our marriage, we had a new car. We bought a new car. And I thought to myself, after we bought it, I thought to myself, this is the dumbest financial decision we made, was to buy a new car. So after the new car, when we went for another car, we bought a secondhand vehicle, and it's the one we're driving still, Nick. Still driving that Cobalt. 15 years we've been driving it. Still in
The one
good
I put the
condition.
dent in with the
Don't say
bucket of
that
the
out.
tractor.
So don't say that out loud, Nick, because there are certain people that are going to listen to the show that didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's as far as I'm going to go with it. Anyway, it's interesting because my wife ran the numbers. Most of our kids were in Air Cadets, and Air Cadets for us was in Pembroke, and we lived in Killaloe, so it was about a 45-minute drive every Wednesday night, or whatever night their parade night was, Tuesday, Wednesday, I forget which one it was. And she did that for 5 kids because Kate didn't go. Who didn't go? Gabby. I think most of them went. And over the 6 or 8 years that we had kids in Air Cadets, she spent about 10 grand in gas just getting them back and forth. It's so, it's, yes, you have to economize. There's no question about it. There's lots of things our kids did not get. They did not get brand new cell phones. They did not get, vacations every year. But what they did get were things like horses and saddles, and they got we tried to take, and everything was an adventure. We would go to Crooked Slide Park. It was a little place in Combermere where you could go and splash around in the water. It was like a free theme park, and we had a ball. So the kids never wanted for anything as far as their needs were concerned, and they did get a lot of cool stuff that a lot of city kids wouldn't even dream of. Have their own uh, they were responsible for them, but have their own animals like sheep and goats and things like that. That was a whole experience they had that they never would have gotten if they lived in a high rise in downtown Toronto, staring at a cell phone. They didn't get cell phones till they left home. I think some of them
Oh,
might have had a few, and even now, you know, they'll have cell phones, but their lives are all built around what they do for a living or their families and so on.
well,
So
sure,
yeah,
and
you have to economies, no question. But
they're
it's how.
responsible. They're responsible for themselves now, so they pay their own
Yes,
freight, and
that's right.
that's fine, and they'll make their own decisions. But again, if you're gonna, the reality is, if you're going to raise children and you're going to make ends meet, and things are tough right now. They're tougher now than they have been for a number of years. Then you
Yep.
have to make sacrifice, you have to make decisions. But you know what? Life goes on. Nobody's going to be deeply psychologically scarred because they don't have the latest cell phone or any cell phones, for that matter. Okay, and you go into but it's not. We're talking about the children here, Nick. Okay, but it's not the children. It's the parents. It's the adults who don't
Yeah.
want to have children, who go, well, it's too expensive to have children, or whatever other reason. All right, but they're living in palatial built houses. Okay, I mean, starter homes today are, when we talk about the affordability of housing. Okay, uh, developers are building expensive houses because that's what people want. They want to start off with the 4 and 5 bedrooms and the 3 bathrooms and the 3-car garage, and if I don't have a pool in the backyard, well, at least let me have enough land in the backyard that I can put a pool in a year or two from now. It's all the bells and whistles. Okay, and I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm saying that those are choices that you make, and you can live without some of these things. We didn't have air conditioning until, frankly, until I was a teenager. And air conditioning in our home was not central air conditioning. When we got air conditioning in our home, it was a window unit
Window.
that went into the laundry.
You know,
Our
now that
kitchen
you
was
mention that, do you
our
know when
kitchen
we
was
got
a
air conditioning on the farm?
uh,
The summer before we left.
okay.
We'd
So
been there for 23 years, and we finally stuck a window air conditioner in the kitchen.
yeah,
And it
air
just, other than that, it was a fan. That was it.
look at cars. Okay, um, you have to have satellite radio, GPS. Forget about. I mean, the government contributes to this with its fuel standards and all kinds of safety standards and that. Okay, and again, not bad things. Okay, I mean, certainly the intent is not bad, but electric windows. Every car has to have air conditioning. Now we have to have separate air conditioning for different seats. Okay, you have to have a heated seat. Okay, you have to have
Heated steering wheels.
heated steering wheels.
Yep, heated steering
Oh,
wheels.
okay. It's so a car without the bells and whistles, and I don't even know that you can get a car anymore without the bells and whistles. But a car without the bells and whistles might cost you what, $15,000, $20,000, new
If
twenty
you
five
can get it.
thousand dollars. Okay, if you can get it. But you know what? Guess what? If you want to have that $50,000 SUV, then that's a choice you're making. And unfortunately, too many of our people today in our part of the world are making those choices. And they're saying, but I can't afford to have children. Or
Well, it's,
more, they're saying, I can't afford to have children. Really, they can afford to have children. They're just saying, really, what they're saying is, I don't want children because I don't want to have to choose between raising children and having my toys. And that's the
yeah,
adults, it's not the children.
you're quite right about that, and we run into that a lot. I know one guy who is a mechanic for one of the airlines here. Now, mind you, he's a little older than I am, and his family's all gone. I don't know if he's married or not, but he went out and spent $80,000 on a pickup, brand new 2019 or 2020 pickup truck. It has every bell and whistle you can think of. And we got talking about it one day, and he said, "It's just money. It's just money. I mean, so what? I want a nice truck. I've earned it." And
Okay, fair
on
enough.
the other hand, it's hard to argue with that because who knows what sacrifices he's made. But you're talking about a different group altogether. You're talking about the 20s and 30s-year-olds who walked out of mom and dad's hard-earned lifestyle and want to carry that into their own home without actually having to pay the same price mom and dad did to get there.
And this irritates me to no end. Okay, and I know what I'm going to say is going to sound a little like shooting myself in the foot. Okay, but really, why is it that seniors who have no expenses anymore, hopefully their mortgage is paid off, they're not raising children anymore, they're on, you know, they many people have private pensions or a public service pension that's, paying them a decent amount of money. What is it with seniors getting discounts all the time, but not young families with children? I think
That's a
that
good
I,
question.
I think that that's totally backwards. I think that if you're going to give discounts to somebody, it should be you're 35 years old and you have 3 children. You should have a 5% discount at Shoppers Drug Mart for every child in your family. Bring the birth certificates in, show
You
me
know
you have
what?
the children. You
Hey, a
qualify
quick
for 15% discount.
I'll tell you a quick story, but first I got a comment on Satan's Playmates comment. He says you can't get a car with other bells and whistles and stuff. They want 20 grand to rip it out. There's a real movement that I've found that people want to go retro. They'll go and spend 25 or $30,000 on a 1970 something that they can work on that doesn't have the bells and whistles, that has the crank handles and things like that. But the story I was going to tell you was there was one day my wife was in a grocery store in Barry's Bay, and at the time we had all the kids home. My sister was living with us, my niece was living with us. So when we sat down at the kitchen table, there was like a dozen people, and she was spending, thousands of dollars. And she got some flack from one of the staff. It's just so the manager came over and she said, "Look, you either set this right, or I'll take my $14,000 a year and go to the other grocery store in town because I don't need you. I can get it over across the street because literally around the corner from one is the other." And he went, "Oh, oh, oh," because there's a certain amount of power you have when you spend that much money with an institution. And that was per year. That wasn't, total up over 20 years. That's what we were spending at the time. Now, my wife is also very frugal. So if she's spending $14,000, even being frugal, that's a lot of groceries going out the door. And they did not want to lose that business.
Absolutely not. Nick, I see we're going to have to go for a break here. We're coming down to the bottom of the hour. So let me just finish this segment off by reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, on the other side of the break, that we've got some very interesting stuff to talk about. But we really want you to join into the show if possible. So 613-604-6464 is the number to call to be on the Nick and Joe show. So we'll be back, I guess, in a couple of minutes here on the Nick and Joe show.